a really special guest and person that I really admire, and it's one of those, the highest. We always hear, and as early as I can remember, I heard people saying, the highest we can get to in this program is servant and becoming a good servant and a useful servant. And this man has helped so many alcoholics. He's a beautiful man. Just hearing his voice calms my blood pressure and makes me feel more grounded. And I haven't got the chance to personally spend a lot of time with him, but I've met him at Fellowship of the Spirit, some other places, and listened to a lot of recordings. So without further ado, I thank you so much, Mickey, for agreeing to do this, and just have fun with it, man. Speak 30 minutes to an hour and take it away. You're muted, Mickey.
Thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate it. I appreciate the invitation. I have a lot of respect for you because I understand what your shirt means. You're carrying a gun. And so listen, I'll snap too, brother. I got it. Beretta for everyone. No, I'm full of hot air. Okay. It's kind of daunting to be asked to come and speak on this. My time in Alcoholics Anonymous proved one thing to me, and especially in early days. I got sober in 1974, and in the first 6 months, I would sit in the AA meetings, and I was just learning the dance and doing that, but we were all sober, I was dry as the Sahara Desert, and it was not pleasant. For me, being sober was like you take a fish and you just throw it on the sidewalk. And it was like, man, I had been drinking since I was 5 years old, and I was 27 years old, and I did not know what life without alcohol was, and it felt like hell. There's a line in a song. It says, "I've been down so long it looks like up." And I had that experience, so now what does up look like? It looks like down. And I would go to an AA meeting, and I'd come home, and Marie, my wife, would be in bed, and I'd lay face down in our living room floor, and I'd beg God to kill me. I just couldn't stand being sober. It hurt so much. And so I go along, and as I say, I'm in these meetings, and we're talking. And in those days, it seemed like the discussion meetings were tough love, especially at 1311 York Street, where I got sober. And if you started talking about your feelings, they called that psychobabble, and they would mute the offender. And so I'm sitting there, and I want to kill myself so bad I can taste it. I just want out. This is like no good. And where do I go now? What anonymous do I go to now? Because I've followed the yellow brick road, and I've ticked the boxes, and I'm suicidal. And I went to a group that was a very tough love group. But they were very precise about working the 12 steps out of the big book. So I learned precision. But I talked to my sponsor, and I said, man, I'm in real trouble. I feel terrible. I feel horrible. What's going on with me? And so I just sort of worked my way up the hierarchy of this group till I got to the high head Panjandrum. And so I was talking with him out on the porch at York Street, and I told him what I was feeling, and he looked at me and he says, I don't know, man, maybe you're going to drink. And to this moment, it breaks my heart to have gotten that response, man. I was looking for help. I have alcoholism. I'm crazy as a March hare. Believe me, I was crazy when I drank, and I was crazier when my wife told me, she said, Mickey, it's not when you drink that I can't stand you. It's when you don't drink. Anybody else relate to that? Can I see a show of hands in here? Anyone? It's when you don't drink. Because it turns out that I have alcoholism. I have a disease that is not in the bottle. It's not in the bottle. It's in the human. It's in the person. And I wouldn't have been able to tell you this in the early days, but my drink was my medicine. That's how I tried to control my alcoholism. And it turned out to be a remedy that almost took me out. So I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I'd now gone to the highest authority I could reach in this particular setup, and I got that answer. So now what? Well, I had been reading the writings of this monk. His name is Thomas Merton, and I'd been reading his writings as I was coming along. As I say, I was 27 when I came to York Street. But when I was 19, I tried to enter the Trappist monastery up by Aspen, and I talked with them, and they said, you know, a monastery, son, is not a place to hide. You go out and live your life for a while, and if you still want to join us, then you can come back and talk to me. So anyway, I was familiar with Thomas Merton, and I've got this major problem. I have this serious problem, and I don't know how to solve it. I am just dying inside, what to do. So I picked up Thomas Merton's book, New Seeds of Contemplation. And I've been reading that book, incidentally, for over 50 years. And chapters 32 to 36 start describing this thing. And I'm reading this book, and I'm just trying to hang on to my corner of the globe, you know. And so I start reading this, and I'm looking at this book and I'm saying, my God, they're describing exactly how I feel, exactly what's happening to me. What in the world is this? So the big surprise, and thank you, God, was that I found out in that book that I was having a massive spiritual experience. Far from being on the verge of drinking, I was on the verge of being transformed. Now, transformed is not a snap your fingers deal. It's never been that in my life. But what happens was they were talking about the desert, being in the desert, being in darkness, having the dark ray of faith come into my soul. And it started to answer another question. So if I was to ask any alcoholic, just any alcoholic, where does it hurt? Where does it hurt? Well, I found out for me it hurts in my soul. It hurts in my soul. And it turns out that for me it established a link for why a spiritual program works on this spiritual cancer in my soul called alcoholism. Okay, so I started to read this thing and I thought, oh my God, this is good news. This is good news, but it's rough news. I expected somewhere in my brain that when I got sober, there would be like rainbows and butterflies and you know what I mean? And I would be, well, in essence, I guess looking back, I would be normal. I would be a good man. I always wanted to be a good man. But there was always two Mickeys, you know. I had my higher self and I had my lower self. And that lower self was winning. So I started to read this book and I'm hanging on to this book. And just FYI, before I forget it, which my forgetter is better than my rememberer, I want to tell you what I give each brand new person that I sponsor. I give them 3 things. I ask them to get New Seeds of Contemplation by Thomas Merton and read chapters 32 through 36 and see if they can relate to any of that. And I ask them to watch the movie The Matrix. So The Matrix is this, inadvertently, I gotta believe this. The people who did The Matrix were in the middle. Well, all right, it goes like this. We have 3 children, 3 grown children. And the middle one was at University of New York in Buffalo. And he was getting a fast track PhD in philosophy, which P.S. He dumped because he did all the schoolwork and he did all the teaching and everything. And he called me one day and he said, I don't want to be in this philosophy or in this academic world. He said, man, it's not for me. But in any event, he would take his freshman students and have them watch The Matrix because it had a lot of philosophical things. I watched The Matrix and I got nothing but God. I got nothing but God. There's things like this, like if you've ever seen the movie, the main character in this thing, they're dealing with a society that is hypnotized itself. They're all walking around hypnotized and they don't mind, man, because, you know, they got pleasure. They're not being bothered by things. You know what I'm saying? And Neo wants something deeper. This character, Neo, wants something deeper. He wants to know, what is the Matrix? And why do I have this yearning to get behind that? So in one scene in the movie, he comes out and he's been laying on this gurney and they've got people that are training him and teaching him about how to be outside of that matrix, that hypnosis. And he says, my eyes, they hurt. And this guy who's leading him said, maybe that's because you've never used them. And I'm looking at this movie and I'm going, my God. And there's things that Neo ends up being able to do that are like mind-blowing. So, and it starts to introduce how much sobriety can we have? How much of a life experience can we have? How expansive of a world can we live in? Is there anything that we're being denied because we're alcoholic? I don't think so. I met a man named Yale who was at York Street when I was early sober, and Yale had been a really, really bad drunk. Cheap flop house drunk. He was an attorney, and he got sober by the grace of God. And Robert Kennedy at that time was the Attorney General of the United States. And they were looking for a U.S. attorney for the state of Colorado. And they had all of these briefs, all these files, and they put him in front of Robert Kennedy. And they said, well, this guy's this and this guy's that. And then they put down Yale's folder and they said, well, here's this guy, but watch out, Bobby, he's an alcoholic. And Robert Kennedy looked around at his advisors and he said, how long has he been sober? And they said, well, he hasn't had a drink in 12 years. And he looked at them and he said, which one of you can say that? And he appointed him the U.S. Attorney for Colorado. The idea being here, it's like I am not so crippled that I can't achieve pretty much anything God wants me to achieve. So there's The Matrix, which I really recommend to you. It's not a science fiction movie. It's extraordinary for what it shows about God. And then we have Thomas Merton's book. And then we have, and Sam said I can talk about any materials I want in this thing, and I'm not restricted. So I'm going to tell you the third one. And the third one is, Caroline Mace's Spiritual Madness. Caroline Mace. Her last name is spelled M-Y-S-S. And her first name is like Carolina, but there's an E at the end. Caroline Mace. I learned that you don't turn your back on the beast. I laid down at 25 years sober with a knife at my wrist, and I was this close to killing myself. I had stepped away from step working and done these things, and my life was deteriorating, and I didn't know it. I would talk occasionally with my fellow wizards, we would talk about things and this kind of stuff, but I had no sponsor, and that went on for like over 10 years. I actually don't know how long. and I ended up on that floor. And somebody in Taos, New Mexico had given me Caroline Myss's Spiritual Madness tape to listen to. And I got it. And of course, I'm alcoholic, so I never listened to it. I mean, come on, I'll accept this thing, but I actually don't have to listen to it, do I? Well, I started listening to it, and it's never been made into a book. It's a talk she gave in Boulder, Colorado, God knows how many years ago. Okay. And, it's like she lays out the topography of the world of the spirit. I took 35 pages of notes on that talk and sat there and I thought, oh my God. So then my life's going like this, my life's going like this, because I checked the boxes and up. Listen, I'm a big book man. I got sober with the big book. I work my life out of the big book. I'm telling you other things that have helped me. Okay. So I started listening to her, and it gave me hope, because the thing that I found on my journey to suicide was that you lose hope and your life starts getting narrower and narrower and narrower till there's only one option. And by the grace of God, I couldn't do it. So I have this fault, and it's like a guy who's an author. He writes, the guy walks into the room. Well, what's the room look like? It has, 5 walls and it's gray. And then he goes on to all the details, and I've just lost my place here. I've just lost my track. But this started to give me hope. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. And it helped me so much. Now, all this time I'm working out of this 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's not been abandoned. And I'm working with other people and this kind of thing. I'm working up to addressing Bill Wilson's notion that if we're going to have what he calls emotional sobriety, and I call it spiritual freedom, is that we need to get out there and just and please forgive me, this is, we'll put me in the heretic corner here for a while, okay? We just need to get out there and start working with those other people, and we're going to love on them, man, and it's all going to turn around, and my dependencies are going to break, and I'll tell you what, if you set me on that road, I would be a dead man. Because I'm carrying the disease of alcoholism in my soul. And it's not being addressed. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so what I did find that worked for me was on page 52, it says, above the bedevilments, it says, is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for new, by the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does. Now, I don't think he's not talking about novelty here. He's going into the bedevilments. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. And I would submit that this is a partial laundry list of the symptoms of the disease of alcoholism. Okay? So it doesn't say, like, if you're really screwed up, you get these things. Or it's when we were drinking. Or it says, if you're alcoholic, you're going to carry this load. You're going to carry this load. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be a real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. When we saw others solve their problems, plural, not just drinking, not just ethyl alcohol, which is what I got as an entree to Alcoholics Anonymous coming in here. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, We had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. And here it says the Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment, not that they flew. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Okay. We agnostics, without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the Wrights would never fly. So what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is I've got to tend to my own knitting. I've got to work the program of Alcoholics Anonymous on where it hurts, and it hurts in my soul. And in Merton's book, I get taken out into the desert. It's not pleasurable. I'm taken out to the desert so there'll be no distractions. There's no dependency on anything. I'm in the desert and I'm alone. Now, my being alone has expanded my spiritual life because I'm alone with God. And God is in the process of transforming me and transforming us. Transforming us how? Well, for me, he's transforming me from this unrecognizable today man, Mickey Mussett, when I was growing up and getting kicked out of every school I went to and being an absolute terror to myself and others, into this guy that is a man of God. How do you get from there to here? It takes dying to self. It takes dying to self. Then what happens when I work with somebody? We're working at a level that is deeper than if I just put the bottle down, I'm going to be okay. How many of us have been, stone okay, just putting the bottle down? Please, let's have a show of hands. And didn't we just run into ourselves when we put that bottle down? I did. God, I ran into Mickey. It's no wonder I got kicked out of those schools. I couldn't handle Mickey. You know what I mean? So it's gotta be, is there a solution? Is there something? So I had to sponsor George in this power group. And the reason I picked George for my sponsor was because he was a short guy with a burr haircut and I thought I could steamroller him. And, God has this immense and interesting sense of humor. So I picked George and there were things I didn't know about George. Now I'm going to say something and please just stick with me for a while, okay? We'll go a really good place with this. There were a couple of things I didn't know about George. I didn't know George was gay. Now this is 1974 and, and I had never been around that culture or anything, so I got, George is gay. Okay. So whatever, this is a new dimension. And he's also just returned from 3 tours in Vietnam as a Navy medic attached to the Marines. He had been out where the wild things are. This guy was an unbelievably tough and compassionate man. The reason I bring up the homosexuality is because I was so ignorant about who I was, I thought maybe I was gay. And I'll tell you how I got there. This is a good ignorance demonstration from me. I thought because I don't want to hit anybody, I don't ever want to hit anybody. I'm very sensitive and I'm very intuitive. I thought I was gay. Now at this point I'm married and I've got my beautiful daughter, who I also didn't know how to be a father to. You know what I mean? We're starting at ground zero here. And George was gay and, we would talk and George would say, Mickey, you're not gay. And I'm thinking, what the hell does he know? I've got this concrete bunker on the top of my shoulders that is proof against anything you can throw at me. Do you know what I mean? I thought that if you were gay, you were a sissy. Now, George has just been out with the Marines for 3 tours in Vietnam. This is no sissy. So that's one thing that George is giving me, and I really needed to learn it. Now, it was very, very hard for me to learn that. But when you don't know who you are, and you're basing your decisions and your life on living like this, it's a really tough road to go. Well, anyway, ultimately, George, he got a little exasperated. He said, okay, Mickey, in your imagination, I'm going to put 2 pictures. I'm going to put a picture of a naked man and a naked woman. Which one do you choose? And I'm thinking, I choose the woman. He said, Mickey, you're not gay. So we got that one solved, and it was a very big gift in my life, and I'm forever grateful to George. And George walked me out of this valley. I remember going over to George's house. He had had all the war he wanted in his life, so he was studying to be a Methodist minister. And his little apartment was not very far from where I worked. So I went over to have lunch with him. And I had my brown bag, and I got my cheese sandwich, and I'm sitting down to talk to George. And I'm telling him the same thing I'm always telling him. I'm cheating on my wife. I'm so angry. Nobody wants to work with me. I'm suicidal. George is listening to this. And, and he said, Mickey, he just stopped me. And he said, cause he'd heard this so many times. He stopped me and he said, Mickey, when I got where you are, I got down on my knees and asked God from the bottom of my heart for help. And he stood up and he picked up his jacket and he says, and you can use my apartment, and he left. Now I'm in George's apartment with half a cheese sandwich, and George is gone. So what do? So he said he got on his knees. So I got on my knees. And I got on my knees and I didn't have any God. And my only prayer was, will somebody please help me? And I left George this little note and I said, George, I don't think I'm supposed to die today. And I was 1 hour back at my office and I called him and I said, George, I have one question for you. And he said, what is it? I said, do I think the things I think and do the things I do because I'm alcoholic? And he said, yeah. And I said, can I get well from the way I live? And he said, yes. And I couldn't believe it. I'd been living like that for 27 plus years. And I just thought that was the way you live. And I couldn't break out of these chains. So we're going back to Bill now. I'm indicating my phone where his article is. We're going back to him now. How do I break the chains? Then I got referred to the big book, and I found out that this all is in this thing called alcoholism. And I came up off the floor this high. I couldn't believe it. That's why I read Problems. Others solve their problems, because I had buku problems. And so I went back to York Street and I grabbed anybody I can get my hands on. I would say, alcoholism is a disease and we can recover from it. And I'm going person to person. And my friend Molly comes down the steps of York Street and she walks a couple of blocks to get on a bus to go to work. And I wanted to make sure she understood this. So I went down the steps. I walked down the dang thing, got on the bus with her. I didn't need to go on the bus. I wanted to make sure she understood that alcoholism is a disease and we can recover from it. Like everybody else knew. They already knew. I was the one in the whole, a whole club that didn't get it. And I got started on my life. Now, what kind of a disease is it that we have to die to ourselves to live? Right? I've got a son who has a shirt, and on his shirt, it's a black shirt, and on it, like in the form of a cross, it says, die every day, die every day. It's that kind of a cross. Well, what's that mean? Well, it means that the Mickey who came here cannot finish the journey. I can't make it through that portal to sobriety and living as Mickey. I have to become another man. I have to become somebody else. How's that for a small assignment? I got to become somebody else because this guy. So there's this weird parable that Jesus told, and his parables are all they're straightforward. I get them. But this one I had some struggle with. So there was this wedding feast, and the guy throwing the wedding feast is going around, and he looks and he said, there's not enough people here at this wedding feast. And he tells his guards, go out to the crossroads and find whoever's there and bring them in. We need more people in the wedding feast. And so they come. So now afterwards, he's walking around the party and he looks at this guy and he says, you're not dressed for a wedding. And he says to his guards, throw him out. Throw him out. And I'm going like, wait a minute. You told them to go get anybody. They got anybody. Now they're here, but you got this one guy who wasn't dressed properly. And I didn't understand that parable for years. And then I was reading one of Baba Ram Dass's books, and he said that guy tried to get into heaven with his ego on. That was what he was wearing, was his ego. He wants to get a spiritual experience. He wants to be transformed, but he's trying to hold on to the old man. Is this making any sense? So what's the price tag? Thank you. What's the price tag for sobriety? For real sobriety, that includes the absence of ethyl alcohol. And look, that bottle's never going to pour itself, come down from that shelf and pour itself down my throat. It has to be invited. And it gets an invitation for the bedevilments on page 52. I lost my place again. It's always an adventure. Come on, God. I'm right here, baby. I need it. So I've got to die to self to live. And we say, well, that we know. That's just surrender. We got it. That's part of AA. We got that nailed down. So what does it feel like to die to self? It feels like we're dying. And if we're alone in our house, we're sitting there dying. And we think we may have done something wrong. Maybe we think we're flunking AA. You know what I'm saying? So now we flunked AA because we're suffering. We're experiencing suffering. One of Merton's word pictures is, we wrap ourselves with the bandages of ego like a mummy. And then we identify with the bandages and we say, that's us. This is me. The bandages. And we're afraid if the bandages are peeled off and unwrapped, there will be no us. We will be the hole in the donut. So what does it mean to die to self? It says in the big book, and correct me if I'm wrong, unless a person experiences, watch this, a complete psychic change, he will not overcome alcoholism. A complete psychic change. So I know probably everybody knows this, but the Greek word psyche, which is the root of psychic, does not mean brain. It means soul. So where does it hurt? It hurts in my soul. Where is my recovery? It's in my soul. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to become a man of God. Who in the world knew coming in here, dying, drinking, that the solution would be for me to become a man of God? Now, a man of God, like we think of a saint as like somebody, forgive me, who's like, well, that's a gross example. who's perfect. And the saints have much more sinew than that. And we are all called to be saints. We are all called to be saints. What is a saint? If you've ever watched Father Barron on YouTube, he's a gas. Barron. He's now Bishop Barron. And he will discuss a variety of topics. And believe me, it's very, very plain and accessible. He says a saint is a person who is interested in one thing, and that's God. Okay? Where am I going without God? What can I do without God? It's not that I don't try. It's not that I don't try, but it's about God. So we are, what does the book say? We've been rocketed into a fourth dimension. Rocketed into a fourth dimension. The existence of which we never, I can't remember the rest of the quote. Never thought about. I have to tell you right now that my heart is so filled with love for you and for being with you. I can't tell you. This is some of the real payoff here. How long do we have to suffer to start getting the doors open? Well, that's up to God. How long will I have these bedevilments in my life? That's up to God. Let me tell you a story. I sponsor a guy in another state, and he pushed a river and married somebody that he really didn't know. And she turned out to be very, 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 very tough and very sick. And his marriage was a disaster. It's the worst marriage I've ever heard of in my life. And I love this man. I've sponsored him for over 20 years. And it took him 15 years to get out of that marriage because he was afraid and he was this and da-da-da-da. And he didn't, the divorce just frightened him so much. And what are other people going to say in the little town he lives in? And there's all these kind of things going on. And I mean, if I told you the particulars, which I'm not going to, I mean, just take my word for it. This was a complete nightmare. So he gets out of that marriage, and then there's litigation upon litigation, and it's whatever, and we got this thing, and who gets the house, and it's all of this stuff, nightmare. And he went from being just this close to a millionaire down to not much at all. And his exes, he and his ex have a daughter, and she needed some surgery. So they took her down to the Children's Hospital in Boston, and they got a diagnosis, and they said she needs to have a surgery, and we think we can really help her get squared away. And she's like 16 years old. And in the course of that, these two, the ex and my guy, have not been able to say a civil word to each other, I'm telling you, for the duration. And they're in Boston, and she says to my guy, would you like to have lunch with me? And he's looking at her and he's backing up, you know what I mean? And they went out and they had a very civil lunch. And the daughter of his ex actually pulled a knife on my guy in the kitchen one time. I mean, it was just really a nightmare. And then another time, and they joined, and the three of them had a lunch in Philadelphia. Now, the ex's mother, her mother was dying. And so my guy goes down there to sit with her I can't remember the word. I'm losing my words. It's the place where you can go to die. Mary Thayer, you know.
Hospice.
Palliative care.
Yes, hospice. And she was unconscious, and the three of them or four of them sat there for 2.5 hours, and they joked and they laughed. And what happens is he didn't lift that. He didn't ask God to change their relationship. He worked the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and in due time, God made that miracle happen. It's the biggest miracle I've ever heard of in AA. So that weight's been lifted off of his shoulders. So how long? It's interesting, in the Psalms, I think at least 40% of the Psalms are complaining. How long, Lord? When, God? What's up? And it's all this kind of stuff, right? But one of the things that Caroline May says, we're going to wait until we don't know we're waiting, because it builds spiritual muscle. It gives us long distance legs, because we are submitting in discipline to God's ownership, which we gave him, P.S., of our lives. So can I trust him? Yes. Yes, I can trust him. Is it easy to live with him? No. It's not easy for me, because, there's this word, there's this word, and the word is discipline. Do you know what I mean? And it's not like I'm doing discipline so I can get a headlock on him. I'm doing discipline because if I don't, I'll die. Now, Gary's here. I can't see you, Gary, but you're still here. Yeah, okay, there you are. Gary and I had a sponsor named Marty Slattery. These guys are meditators. They are meditators. And I tried meditation like long time ago, and I didn't see an angel. I didn't levitate. I didn't smell like roses. You know what I mean? This is useless. And so I got this whole mindset, right, Gary, that I can't meditate. I just can't meditate. I tried transcendental meditation. I tried, whatever. And then there was something in Gary and in Marty Slattery that I wanted. And what happens was they have this sweetness in their spirit. And I didn't have that sweetness. And I can remember I make custom cowboy boots for a living, and I was just starting to do this. And it was very, very difficult. So I'd call Marty and I'd say, Marty, wah, 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 about the boots. And he would listen to me very kindly every time. And he wouldn't say anything. And then he would finish with this, Mickey, it ain't about the boots. Did you meditate today? No, Marty, I told you meditation doesn't work for me. So I had 30 years without meditation, and I want to share this one with you. And then Marty, God rest his soul, he died, and then Gary sponsored me, and this leaning on meditation, there's this thing that they're talking about, this foreign deal about meditation. So I was given this form of meditation, and you guys probably have a name for it and so on, but my meditation is I sit my rear end in a chair first thing every morning. I give God back the first fruits of my day. I give him the first 15 minutes of my day back. And I sit there in obedience, not like I've got a prison sentence to carry out, but this is my gratitude, and I sit with him. And when I'm sitting there, I have monkey mind, and my mind just jumps from this tree to that tree and over here. Is there enough oil in that car? And blah, it goes like that. And so I'm thinking, now Marie, my wife, is meditating, and she said, I went to a place where I wasn't a woman, I was a person, and she's having this like whatever's going on with her, and I'm back over here with monkey mind and this, the wiring diagram of my house. It's just craziness. So what's really happening? I can tell you what I think is happening. I think that God is circumventing this coconut on my shoulders and doing soul surgery on me, and he's taking me away from the intellect to do it. He's just doing his work on me. And here's how I found out that was true. I found out, like on the flip side of the coin, what happens on a day when I don't meditate. And within 2 hours, I turn into a rattlesnake. I guarantee you that's true. I am just irritable as hell. And, and my wife and I, we work in our home. We live in our home. We're here like all day, every day together. And so that's not very useful. So Gary, thank you very much for that gift. I can't thank you enough. And my meditation is just that. But I know that I'm with God and I sit with him. All I say is when I sit down with him, I say, I came to you to sit with you and be healed. And because every day, I don't know how your days go, but man, my days, I've got like so many roller coaster rides in my days. It's crazy. I've used up practically the whole time. I hope this has been of some use to anyone. It's such an honor to be with you. And I guess we have a little bit of time left, Sam.
It's an hour and a half, Mickey. Keep going, bro.
Okay, so there were these three guys. No, anyway. So let's go into Miracle Country then. Thank you very much, Sam. I thought you had said that. I wrote down 30 to 60 minutes because I remember so very well what you tell me. Okay, so Marie and I, so Don Pritz was this guy that he just carried the love of God and the power of God in him. And one of the gifts he had was like, if there was like a 1,500 person convention and Don was talking to you, I guarantee you would be the only person that existed for Don Pritz in that room. What a wonderful guy. What a wonderful guy. And he would get speaking engaged, that people would say, will you come speak for us? Come speak, and he couldn't do it all. So he would just shuffle it off to others of us. Now I'm 1 year sober. Let's see, do I tell? No, I'll save that one. Anyway, so I was really very new sober, and he was invited by some people on a reservation in South Dakota to speak, and there was like 10 Indians. 10 little Indians got together, and through this deal with 60 Indians, Native Americans. I'm not very PC. I'm 73, going to be 74, but I try. Anyway, so they're going to throw this powwow, and Don says, I want you and Marie to go out and go to South Dakota and be part of this deal. And so we did. And I don't know if you've ever been in a Native American conference or powwow, but it is like so special. If you ever get an opportunity, do it. I'm telling you, these people would stand up at the mic, plant their feet on the ground, and tell you exactly who they are, what the problem is, and whatever. And, we just loved being with them. And there was a break in the powwow one day, and Marie and I decided to stretch our legs, take a walk, and this ambulance came screaming by us, and we thought nothing of it. And we came back, and it turned out that this guy, whose name was Tuffy, was there, and he said during the break, because the reservations are dry, so you have to go off the reservation to get alcohol, and I think it was his nephew, went off to get it, and they flipped the car. And he went out and he was holding his nephew in his arms, dying. And the Flight for Life was trying to get there. And the priest came and gave him last rites. And his heartbeat was going through the last rites. And when he was finished, he flatlined and he came back to be with us. And he said, I just didn't want to be alone. And so he shared with us. And it was this magnificent thing. I can't remember the name of the reservation. I'm sorry, I'm trying, but it's not there. So we went back to Rapid City, which we had flown into, and then having a car drive out. So we go back to Rapid City, and it's April 14th. I know because I didn't file my taxes. I always remember this. So here I am, and there's this blizzard hits Rapid City, and we can't fly out. So they take us back to the hotel in Rapid City, and we waited out. So we get back in the morning, and there's like a 50-mile-an-hour crosswind on the flight line, and I'm really not a flyer. I'm really scared about flying. And so this plane is like in mild turbulence on the ground, and I'm going, oh my God, how am I going to handle this thing? So we have to die to become the person that God wants us to be. So the Blessed Mother of God, Mary, came to me. I did not see her. She started talking to me before we took off, and she said, Mickey, I'm going to be with you on this airplane ride all the way. I will tell you when the weather's going to get rough, and you hold my hand, and I'll be with you, and I'll fly with you all the way home. And I'm 46 years sober, and for the last 45 years, the Blessed Mother flies with me on every flight. On every flight, she just says, hold my hand, and we go and do this thing. Now, when we're starting to land, now when it gets rough in the airplane, I pray for everybody else in the airplane. I start praying Hail Marys for everyone else in that airplane, because I know if I'm scared, I know they must be scared, some of them anyway. So I'm praying. And then I say to the Holy Spirit, please be beneath our wings and bring us safely home. And I can't tell you the number of times well, if you've ever landed in Denver, you understand that this thing is like, you're going to experience bumps coming into this city. And I can't tell you the number of times we've been headed for it. The pilots said, listen, to the staff, sit down, buckle in. It's going to be a rough one, and it's smooth as silk going in. And one time I'm on the airplane. Now, we have been rocketed into the fourth dimension. Don't forget this now. This is what I'm talking about. This is what the fourth dimension experience has been like for me. And I'm there in the airplane, and I started praying to Mary, and I'm thinking about her. And like I see this dusty road, and then I go over to Mary's house. What? And I'm not blissed out or anything, and she's talking to me. She loves me a lot. She tells me that a lot. And I'm with her at her house, and she says to me, you have no idea how far into heaven you are right now. Our experience so our ego tells us, don't let go. Do not let go. It's going to be miserable. He's going to wreck your life if you let go. Well, that's not been my experience. Although there have been many times I thought, what hell hurricane did I walk into, Mary Thayer, in my life? And those have made me stronger. As a matter of fact, my path through sobriety has been one calamity after another. And I was like looking at God and saying, like, what? Whereas the moonbeam, the rainbows and butterflies in this deal. And it turns out that he wanted me to be tougher than that. He wanted me to be stronger than that. And he gives me these things. Sam, you mentioned that I can bring up the rosary. I can talk about anything I want. Well, I pray the rosary at night because when I was a kid, my parents were so violent that I couldn't go to sleep. My brother would come in and hold me, my big brother, because I was shaking so badly I couldn't go to sleep. So sometimes if I turn my back to the edge of the bed, I get scared. And I just start praying my rosary. You know what I mean? Because I need God all the time. Now, one of the things I'm learning currently is that I need to include God at each new thing I do. So I'm going to do this operation on the boots, and then I'm going to do this next one, and I invite him in, and I invite him in. Because if I don't invite him in, you don't want to buy these boots. You do not want these boots. I share these things with you. I don't share them. I share them very rarely. And I want to tell you about one other thing. Actually, I'd like to tell you about lots and lots of things. But this is one. So Carolyn Mace, in her talk, Spiritual Madness, she says this: if you can't sleep at night, get yourself a notebook and a pen. And if you're awake, and I've been an insomniac for 30 years, and she says, and get your pen and this thing and say, God, I'm right here, talk to me. So, excuse me, I did it because I thought, what the heck have I got to lose, you know? So I get my notebook and my pen. And now at that time, my mother was 86 years old. She had survived a brain aneurysm and she was coming home in 10 days to live with us. My father had already passed away. I had a very, very rocky relationship with my mother. But after my dad died, we got so close. And when my mother died, it's like I missed her the most. It was this beautiful transformation that happened. But in any event, I started writing and I wrote this: Mickey, your mother's going to die and it's okay. Your relationship is tied up with a ribbon and it's going to be okay. Everything's fine. And my mother died the next day. And that's how my pages, I call it my prayer pages, started. I've been writing the prayer pages for 20 years. I have 700 prayer pages marking my journey and my relationship with Jesus Christ and with Mary and with the saints. And it's guided my life, and it's guided me and Marie's life. I would never have become a bootmaker if it hadn't been for those pages. I would never have ridden a motorcycle. Check this one out. Jesus started telling me, I want you to ride a motorcycle. And I'm going, there's no way, man. Because when I was first married, I had this Honda. And I was like going through the intersection and I looked over here and it was like, I'm going, my God, I'm going to get hit. And I did. And that car caught the rear wheel side. My rear wheel spun me around, and the traction when I hit that intersection was phenomenal. And I had a quarter-sized divot right out of my helmet here. Thank God I was wearing one. And it put me back in the gutter, laying on my back with the water running down my back. And I was afraid to move anything because I was afraid it was going to fall off. And I was uninjured, and Marie took my license away. So years and years and years passed. And then in the pages, Mickey, I want you to ride motorcycles. I'm going, oh, no, really? This is where I find out it's really not God. And this is, I've been, deceived all these years. And he says, I mean it. I want you to get out of your fear. And so I went up to Oregon and I rode this man's wife's motorcycle and got back to riding motorcycles for a while. And now I don't do it anymore because I'm afraid. But it got me out of my fear. So this dance with God, and Marie and I, we live kind of like in a monastery. We get up in the morning, we meditate, we pray, we eat our meal, we go to work. Do you know what I mean? And we have this thing. And in one of the pages, Jesus said to me, he said, I would have placed you in a monastery, but you can never stop talking. So I'm just going to give you a monastery at home. He's got a great sense of humor. One time he said in the pages, Mickey, you make me laugh. This is all been given to me by working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and reading these additional materials to understand, look at this world of the spirit. How big is it? It's this big. It's enormous. Now, I still suffer. I was told by my sponsor, he mentioned this word pride. I didn't know what pride was. I thought pride was I take pride in work in making good boots. I take pride in keeping the grass cut. You know what I mean? And in Father Barron in the YouTube, he has this one talk called The 7 Deadly Sins and the 7 Lively Virtues. And please don't miss it. It's just a wonderful talk. The 7 Deadly Sins and the 7 Lively Virtues by Father Barron. And in it, he says that pride is the number one worst of the deadly sins. Number one. It is where we replace God with ourselves. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And so I've been really having problems lately doing my boots. And I thought it was because I was a perfectionist. It's not. It's because I'm too proud to have anything less than perfection. And so now I've got this new avenue in to go back to God with and say, I'm sorry for stealing your territory. Now, I have observed in the time that I sponsors people now, I went around the United States talking about what I'm talking about now, about where does it hurt, about alcoholism is not in the bottle, about these things for over 40 years. And it was like crickets. It was like crickets. I remember calling Gary and saying, Gary, I'm in this thing and this, I don't know what they call a Woodstock of AA, and it's all this very fevered kind of rapid fire stuff going on. And I said, Gary, nobody's talking about alcoholism. They're all talking about drinking. And he said, Mickey, that's why we're out there. That's why we're out there. Well, there's this line in the book, and it never meant anything to me. It was, and we are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. And I'm going, what am I, chopped liver? What the hell is this? What is this? And he will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. And I've had that happen in the last 2 years. In the last 2 years, I've gotten to be with people that are transparent, that are really giving a shot to this thing as a community. And it's really been a very, very big joy. Okay. I'm just looking at the chats for just a second. Okay. So it's at 7:45 my time. Is that our time up? Yep.
No, it's up at, what is it, 7:40? It's up at 8 o'clock your time.
Okay.
Yep.
Before I just, I told you he wouldn't put me in a monastery because I never stopped talking. It's one of those things. I'm pretty pumped about all this. I'm extremely pumped about all this. And what I've learned also is that, look, we don't get this is not closed circuit. It's not, we get sober to help another alcoholic get sober to another, you know what I mean? And pass it around like that. We do that. But it's like we're for the world. We are here to change the world. Seriously. With the tools and the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. Look at Fellowship of the Spirit. Bill says in his talk, he says, maybe this is going to be the new thing in AA. I forget what new thing he was talking about, but early in the first paragraph. Well, the new thing in AA is Fellowship of the Spirit. It's Fellowship of the Spirit, and it's gone lightning around the world. It has gone around the world. What can one person do? What can 3 people do? What can 10 people do? Do you know what I'm saying? It is amazing. If God's in it, what can happen? I had the hardest time talking to people at the conferences. We would get together in one of the houses, and I would talk to people who maybe were newcomers to the Fellowship of the Spirit. And I would say, what this is. And I couldn't put a finger on why this thing was so different and so exciting. Why Fellowship of the Spirit? Because we called it the miracle. We call it the miracle on the mountain. I remember bringing a guy who was 9 years sober that I was working with. He was from the South, and he came to his first spots, and he got there, and he was there for maybe a couple of meetings, and he said to me, Mickey, I've got to start my program over. And I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was happening. And it's this God, Fellowship of the Spirit. It's the Spirit of God. if I try to push the river, my life doesn't work. Anybody else have that experience? Right? Yeah. But with him, and then he writes straight and crooked lines, man. You know, he writes straight and crooked lines. I don't know where we're going. And the next thing I know, I'll give you an example. We're kind of running a little bit low on funds right now. So then I get a call this morning and this guy says, 5 years ago, we were walking out of this church downtown and you told, I looked, I was kneeling in church behind this guy and he had holes in his boots. I mean, like big holes in his boots. And he looked like a guy of some means. And I walked up to him after Mass and I said, listen, I see this, that you've kind of worn those boots out. I said, I'd like you to know that I'm a custom cowboy boot maker. And he just thought that was terrific. 5 years later, he called me this morning. He called me and he said he wants 2 pairs of boots. He lost my card, couldn't remember where I was, who I was. And that's the way Maria and I live. We don't know from 1 month to the next, are we going to be able to pay the bills? We keep a roof over our heads. I got 700 pages that talk about that. And it's like living like the lilies of the field. And it turns out that it's okay. It's okay. I think that our entire fortune right now is somewhere around $333. And thank God for Social Security. And so that's going to help. And that comes up by next Wednesday. And we're always going to, I think I can, like the little train that could, I think I can make it to that Wednesday. And this is the way we live. And I get a chance to change every day. And I get a chance to be with the same lady I brung to the dance 50 years ago. So on New Year's Eve, and we picked New Year's Eve because I was still a practicing drunk for the first 3 years of our marriage. I picked New Year's Eve for our wedding because I thought, I certainly as an alcoholic cannot forget New Year's Eve. So on New Year's Eve, we're going to be married 50 years. And it turns out that love is real. Thank you, Jim. It turns out that love is real and it really can work. And it's not like my image of love where it's just all these moonbeams and rainbows again. It's just not that. It's real. And I've been given that gift. Now we've got a little bit of time and I would be interested if anybody has a question or anybody would like to say something. I'd entertain that if you'd like.
Yeah, we open it up, Mickey, whenever you're done. Just open it up for free share and questions and stuff. So you want to open it up?
Yes, sir.
All right. Hey, thank you so much, man. That was beautiful. Ran all the bases.
Thank you, Sam.
Suzanne has her hand up, and just raise your hand if you'd like to share, but Suzanne has her hand up, and we'll just call on people with their hands raised. Suzanne?
Hey, thank you. Mickey, it was really fun to hear you. I'm giving you one of these. It was,
thank you, Suzanne.
I heard about this meeting. I'm in New York City. I heard about this meeting about a month ago from a guy that goes to a Zoom meeting in Ardmore, Pennsylvania on Saturdays.
Yes.
So we get around.
Yes.
Anyway, I hit the wall last night and, it was so wonderful to remember this. I had 40 years in July and I feel like I'm more fucked up than I've been in a really long time.
And you're right on time.
Yeah. And I know all the reasons. And the great joy to me is I remember a friend of mine saying, I don't know what it is, but whenever I come to these meetings, I am physically, spiritually, mentally changed. And I felt that, 5 minutes into this meeting, the reading that was done by the opening guy and then you starting to talk. And yesterday, Tuesday, I was, asked to speak at a meeting, and I thought it was an AA meeting, and it turned out to be an Al-Anon meeting. And that was fine because I'm equipped in both. But I started laughing and thinking how I'm just kind of off kilter. But I woke up, I couldn't get to sleep last night, and I usually fall asleep. I'll preface it by saying I'm thick in the grief with my mom who died just this past summer, who I adored. And she had been sober 44 years.
Oh,
and
wow.
she died perfectly. She was that kind of person you described. I mean, she told her doctor she lived through the brain cancer because of her Rosalie beads. And he missed the joke. But she was faithful and funny and spirited and everything good, everything that I ever wanted in a mom. And she got sober at 50 and died at 94. So I had her for a good long time. But I moved to New York in March. I retired. I sold a house. I sold my business. Everything in my life just changed. And so of course I'm going to hit the wall. And, I was speaking at this meeting the other day and I found 2 readings to add to your list if you haven't already read them. And one is, Henry Nouwen has an article on useless prayer. Oh. And it's perfect. That's the title of the piece, Useless Prayer. And the other one is Teilhard de Chardin and Patient Trust in Ourselves and the Slow Work of the Lord. And that's just me right now. You know, as my old friend Catherine used to say, the cake is in the oven. Like I know that I'm being molded right now. But when I went into the kitchen last night and started crying, and it was just heaving, like sobs. And I thought, I want to get off here. I don't want to do this. I can't live like this anymore. And I thought, I don't want to die, but I don't want to live like this. And so here's my new beginning. And, it does happen that fast. And I believe in it. And it's funny how you mentioned discipline because there was a reading or something that happened the other day. And all I wrote down in my book was 4 times, discipline, 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 discipline. Like, I don't have to be there. I just have to do it. And that's the way I feel, like the cake is in the oven. And so I'm doing it. And, monkey brain and all that doesn't matter. When I read Useless Prayer, I get so choked up because he says after 30 or 60 or 90 days of this sitting here thinking about all the people I hate and the people that hate me and the things I should be doing and shouldn't be doing, blah, blah, blah. Some gentle voice speaks to me in the corner of my soul and lets me know that I'm not alone. And that's what it is given to me time and time and time again. And so I just feel blessed to be here tonight. Thank you. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
You too.
What a beautiful share. Thank you so much. Charles F., Danville, Indiana.
Hey, Mickey. Charlie's free off.
Where is Charlie? Oh, there you are. Okay. Hi, Charlie.
Oh, man, it was, I've been thinking about you. It's kind of weird. The story you told me years ago about the vase, the cracked vase, and if it holds water, it's because God contained it, has been on my mind and my heart for quite a while. I've been going through a lot of stuff. Just had a belly button birthday, 67 years old, 31 years sober, and doing all the right stuff, and my soul is just trashed. Prayer life, I thought, was good, but I love, I'm in a 10, church, and they even made me a deacon in my church. And I said, well, you guys sure you guys prayed about this stuff, because, you know, I think it was Don Prince said one time, that he was a spiritual thief. And that's where I've come to, and that's just been really bothering me that, I've got so many AA heroes out there, and a lot of you guys I look up to, and, I love Gary, and Gary's my sponsor and stuff, and I've loved him for many, many years. And, Jim, Shackelford, and when he passed, it was really hard on me. Still is. But, getting back to this whole thing of, denying self, my wife's meditation book, it said November 7th was my birthday. It says God calls us to deny ourselves. And it says you have to call me to say no. And the things that I do, I haven't learned that. And I haven't applied that to where I say no to myself. I try to teach these guys, that I sponsor, how to say no. It's real easy to just say no. But, I want to do motorcycle, and I go out and buy me a new motorcycle. I can't say no, But thank you just for being here and reminding me of the things I need to do. And love you, man.
Love you too, Charlie. Thank you so much.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Charlie. Bruce or Gay? I don't know which one, or maybe Bruce and Gay.
I'm Bruce. I'm an alcoholic.
Bruce?
And, man, I'm really nervous. I'm not one to raise my hand, but listening to you, Mickey, I just had to raise my hand. I don't know if you remember Gay and I, but about 12 years ago, we went to a retreat in Santa Barbara, and you led that retreat. And, in fact, a couple guys that were at that retreat are here tonight, Mike and Wyatt. And Gay and I just fell in love with you. We just thought you were the sweetest, kindest man that we ever met. And I have not seen you in all these years since. So we heard you were speaking tonight, so we're really looking forward to hearing you. And you're still the sweetest, kindest man. But I love your talk. I love this meeting, but I love your talk. And, I had my own experience, with that second surrender. We kind of get chased in here by the first half of the first step, but it's that second half of that first step, the unmanageability of our lives, that keeps us here. And, in about 10 years of sobriety, I was sitting across the table from this guy, Clint Hodges, and I had asked him to help me. And he asked me to open up the book to page 52 and read those bedevilments. And I'll never forget just the impact of reading those words in front of him and realizing that was a perfect description of who I was. And he said that was a test for current untreated alcoholism, and you just passed. And that was the beginning of my life being changed. By going through the steps, but not because of the drinking, but because of the unmanageability of my life. And really having that experience, like it said in the book, I was convinced that self manifested in its various ways was what had defeated me. And that my solution was a relationship with God. And anything else that I depend on is going to let me down. So, and I remember your story about the boots, and I'm so excited that you're still making those. And anyway, we love you so much. It was so wonderful to see you tonight and hear you. And I hope we bump into you again one of these days. Thank you, Mickey.
Thank you so much, Bruce and Gay.
So that about wraps us up. Mickey, did you have anything else? Like I usually ask somebody, do you have anything you thought about in the moment after you got done speaking that you might want to address that you might not have mentioned?
No, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I guess I got it all out. And, if Sam, you could stick around for just a minute or two afterwards, there were 32 chats. I guess I'd like to have an opportunity to take a look at them.
Yeah.
But we have to keep it open long enough so I can get to them. That's a lot, but I just
no
appreciate you guys so much. I tell you what, I have discovered this, and it was shocking to me. I will add this. I was invited to talk to 2 different groups in another city, in another state. And I talked to one, and it was like this. And it was like I was talking, and I could just feel that we were on the same, wavelength. And I went to another one, and I could practically not speak. And it was real interesting to me because those people were really tied more to their group. Do you know what I'm saying? They were leaning on that group like crazy, like that group was going to save them. And you know what? The strength is not in the group. There is strength in the group, but if we're all seeking God, and that's what counts. Because guess what? When we die, we don't get to bring our lawyer to argue our case. We don't get to bring the group that says, this guy's a fine man. We're going to face God alone. So we might as well do it now. Thank you for the opportunity, Sam.
Hey, thank you. That was beautiful, man. So the way we close this is we just mute ourselves and kind of go to our inner room, close our eyes, and everybody, if you care to join us, inwardly say to ourselves the Lord's Prayer. Meet you back out of it in a second. All right. Thank you guys for a great meeting.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.